Most suspension issues don't come from worn shocks or struts. They come from worn bushings, dry joints, and alignment drift that mechanics rarely mention because it's small, cheap work, not big repairs. I watched a customer spend $2,400 on new shocks because his car felt loose. 3 weeks later, same problem. The real issue? Destroyed bushings and loose bolts that cost almost nothing to fix. The difference between suspension that rides tight at 200,000 miles versus one that feels sloppy at 80,000 isn't luck. It's one maintenance trick mechanics never share because there's no profit in it. The real trick: restoring suspension feel, not parts. Here's what the industry doesn't want you to understand. Replacing parts generate revenue. A shock replacement costs $800 per axle. A full suspension overhaul runs $3,000 to $5,000. But restoring how your suspension actually feels, that might cost $200 in materials and a Saturday afternoon. The secret mechanics keep to themselves is that suspension feel comes from geometry, lubrication, and proper torque, not necessarily new components. You can restore that tight, controlled ride by lubricating suspension joints that have gone dry, tightening subframe bolts that have loosened from vibration, recentering the steering system that's drifted off axis, and checking ride height that's settled unevenly. These procedures take time without generating big invoices, which is exactly why shops skip them and jump straight into parts replacement. I've watched a customer spend over $2,400 on new shocks and struts because his car felt floaty and loose. 3 weeks later, he returned with the same complaint. The real problem? His control arm bushings were destroyed, and his subframe bolts had loosened by 30%. 20 minutes of proper inspection would have identified the actual issue and saved him from unnecessary parts replacement. The shocks he replaced were functioning perfectly. They just couldn't compensate for failed bushings and loose mounting points. Inspecting bushings, the #1 source of bumps and clunks. Bushings are the silent foundation of suspension performance, and they wear out long before shocks lose their dampening ability. These rubber isolators separate metal components while allowing controlled movement. When they fail, your entire suspension geometry falls apart. What you need to check: control arm bushings that connect your wheels to the frame, sway bar bushings that control body roll, trailing arm bushings on rear suspensions, and strut mount bushings that isolate road impacts from the cabin. Each of these components deteriorates at different rates depending on driving conditions and vehicle design. The symptoms reveal themselves gradually. A bouncy ride that feels disconnected from the road indicates bushings have lost their ability to control movement. Wandering steering, where the car doesn't track straight, shows bushings allowing excessive play in suspension geometry. Clunking noises over bumps means metal components are contacting each other because rubber isolators have failed. These signs appear months or even years before shocks actually wear out. Fixing worn bushings transforms how a car feels. I've seen vehicles with 150,000 miles ride like new simply from replacing $200 worth of bushings while leaving the original shocks in place. Most mechanics skip this inspection because bushing replacement is labor-intensive without generating massive parts markup. They'd rather sell you $1,200 in shocks than spend 2 hours pressing in $40 bushings that actually solve the problem. The forgotten step: lubricating serviceable joints. Modern vehicles increasingly use sealed components, but many trucks, SUVs, and older cars retain greasable joints that require regular maintenance. This is automotive knowledge from an era when longevity mattered more than planned obsolescence. Ball joints, tie rod ends, and sway bar links often feature small metal fittings called Zerk fittings that accept grease gun pressure. A single lubrication session restores smooth movement and eliminate the clunks that most drivers assume mean replacement is necessary. Fresh grease flushes out contamination while creating a protective barrier that prevents moisture from destroying bearing surfaces. I once serviced a pickup truck where the owner complained about constant clunking from the front suspension. The dealership quoted $1,800 for ball joint replacement. Instead, I spent 15 minutes with a grease gun, pumping fresh lithium grease into every fitting until old contaminated grease purged from the boots. The clunking disappeared completely. Those worn-out ball joints lasted another 60,000 miles because someone finally gave them the lubrication they were designed to receive. This tiny maintenance task can make suspension feel dramatically better. But shops don't mention it because there's no profit in selling you a $12 tube of grease and 20 minutes of labor. They'd rather wait until the joints actually fail, then charge you hundreds for replacement. Micro alignment, the adjustment shops never offer. alignment shops sell full four-wheel alignments as a package service. What they don't offer is the fine-tuning that actually restores perfect feel because it requires expertise and time without commanding premium pricing. Toe fine-tuning is the secret adjustment that transforms steering precision. Slight toe misalignment, we're talking millimeters, causes poor straight line stability where the car constantly wanders and requires steering corrections. It creates uneven tire wear patterns that appear long before obvious pulling develops. Most alignment machines flag specifications as within range, when they're actually at the edge of acceptable, leaving performance on the table. Steering center reset is the adjustment mechanics almost never perform. Sometimes the steering wheel sits perfectly centered, but the suspension geometry underneath is offset. This creates asymmetric handling where the car turns differently left versus right. The rack may be off-center by a few degrees, causing uneven tire scrub and premature wear on one side. I had a customer who'd been to 3 different alignment shops trying to fix a persistent pull. Every shop certified the alignment as within spec. The problem? The toe was set at the extreme edge of specification on both sides, and the steering rack was 3 degrees off-center. 30 minutes of precise adjustment, setting toe to the middle of specification and recentering the rack transformed the car. It finally tracked straight without constant correction, and the handling became predictable in both directions. These micro adjustments require skill and attention that many techs don't bother developing because they can bump out generic alignments faster and move on to the next car. Before you continue, hit that subscribe button and click like if you're discovering suspension secrets that could save you thousands in unnecessary repairs. Check tire deformation. Most people don't know this exists. Over time and miles, tires develop internal issues that create suspension systems, even when every actual suspension component is perfect. This phenomenon confuses even experienced mechanics who can't find anything wrong with shocks, bushings, or alignment. Tires develop flat spots from sitting in one position too long, especially in cold weather or after extended parking. They experience internal belt shifts where steel reinforcement separates from rubber, creating inconsistent stiffness around the circumference. Uneven wear patterns cause one section of the tire to be significantly harder or softer than the rest, generating vibrations that feel like suspension problems. These tire issues manifest as bad suspension feel, a rhythmic bouncing or wandering that changes with speed. Drivers assume their suspension is shot when the real culprit is tire deformation. Mechanics often don't mention this because the diagnosis requires rotating tires to different positions and test driving, which takes time without guaranteed revenue. The fix is remarkably simple and cheap. Rotate the suspected tire to a different position and drive. If the problem moves with the tire, you've found your answer. Replace that one tire and suddenly your terrible suspension rides perfectly smooth. I've seen customers on the verge of approving $2,000 suspension overhauls who only needed a single $150 tire replacement to solve the issue completely. Retorquing suspension bolts, the secret fix. This technique is huge and almost no mechanic talks about it because there's minimal profit in something that takes 15 minutes and doesn't require parts. Suspension bolts gradually loosen from constant vibration. Every pothole, speed bump, and rough road sends shockwaves through the chassis. Over thousands of miles, this vibration works fasteners loose by small increments you'll never notice until problems develop. Potholes deliver massive impact loads that stress bolt threads. Age and corrosion reduce clamping force as metals oxidize and surfaces deteriorate. Retorquing control arm bolts, subframe mounting bolts, and strut top mounts accomplishes several critical things. It tightens the chassis, eliminating the microscopic play that creates mysterious clunks and rattles. It removes random suspension noises that drivers assume mean expensive repairs. It restores stability by ensuring every component maintains a proper position under load. It dramatically improves steering precision by eliminating slop in the suspension mounting points. I once diagnosed a luxury sedan where the owner complained about a persistent rattle and vague steering feel. The dealership recommended $3,500 in suspension work, including new control arms, bushings, and an alignment. I spent 20 minutes with a torque wrench, methodically checking every suspension fastener. 12 different bolts were loose, some by as much as 40% of specification. After proper retorquing, the rattle disappeared completely and steering precision returned. Total cost? $0 in parts, 30 minutes of labor. This is one of the biggest secret tricks in suspension tuning, but shops don't promote it because they can't generate invoice dollars from proper torque procedures. Refreshing sway bar components, the silent ride upgrade. Sway bars control body roll during cornering while simultaneously affecting overall ride comfort. These often overlooked components make an enormous difference in how a suspension feels, yet they're rarely addressed during routine maintenance. Cheap but powerful upgrades transform suspension behavior. New sway bar bushings eliminate the squeaks and clunks that develop as rubber deteriorates. Upgraded polyurethane bushings provide more precision control with greater durability than factory rubber. New end links restore the rigid connection between sway bar and suspension that's been lost to wear and corrosion. This simple refresh can make a car feel more planted and composed. The difference is immediately noticeable during lane changes, cornering, and even normal straight-line driving. Body roll reduces, steering response sharpens, and the floaty feeling many drivers accept as normal simply disappears. A complete sway bar refresh costs $150 to $300 in parts and can be completed in an afternoon with basic tools. The improvement in ride quality rivals what most drivers expect from $2,000 shock replacements. I've had customers literally ask if I'd installed performance suspension when all I'd done was replace worn sway bar bushings and links. That's how dramatic the transformation can be from components most mechanics never inspect. The trick mechanics don't want to explain. The fundamental truth about suspension is this: mechanics focus on big repairs because that's where profit lives. Shock replacement at $800 per axle, control arm assemblies at $600 each, complete suspension overhauls approaching $5,000. These generate revenue and keep shops profitable. But perfect suspension feel doesn't come from throwing parts at the problem. It comes from understanding the subtle interactions between bushings that isolate vibration, joints that allow controlled movement, alignment that keeps geometry correct, proper torque that maintains chassis rigidity, and tires that interface with the road surface. These fundamentals require knowledge, patience, and diagnostic skill that many techs don't possess or don't bother applying. It's faster and more profitable to recommend part replacement than spend an hour inspecting bushings, lubricating joints, fine-tuning alignment, and torquing fasteners to specification. Your suspension doesn't need expensive overhauls. It needs attention to small details that restore original performance. Mechanics won't tell you this because their business model depends on parts replacement, not preventative maintenance that extends component life. The procedures I shared cost less than one major suspension repair. Inspecting bushings takes 30 minutes. Lubricating joints requires 15 minutes and a $12 grease gun. Micro alignment adjustments add 20 minutes to a standard service. Combined, these techniques restore suspension feel that rivals new vehicle performance while preventing the premature wear that leads to expensive failures. The difference between suspension that feels loose at 80,000 miles and one that rides tight at 200,000 miles isn't luck or superior parts. It's understanding what actually matters and maintaining those critical elements before problems develop. Which suspension trick surprised you most? Share in the comments which technique you'll implement first, and subscribe for more automotive knowledge that puts control back in your hands.